In terms of like that strategic planning, is there like a way that you like to approach it? Like, what's your methodology with the strategic planning?
I like to have a really clear idea of what the goal is. So what is it? What do you see 5 years from now? What would you like this to look like? Do you want to have, do you want world domination? I know that my goal is world domination, but I have to make sure that that's aligned with the board. If that's your goal, how do we achieve that? What can we do like in the next 6 months? Okay, let's make sure that we grow this market. Can we start looking at these market? Are there conferences in this market? Where does it make most sense? How are we going to scale that with our current staff? What are we going to need for HR in order to grow that? What does marketing for that look like? So I think it's just having a really clear idea of what that end goal is. If you don't have that, then you can't plan anything else to get there. And I think that's where you can really easily get off track.
Just tell me about MetricAid, what you guys do.
So MetricAid schedules physicians. In particular, we schedule emergency department physicians. Our original core product was built with the goal in mind of improving patient wait times and reducing things like administrative burden and physician burnout. So 10 years ago, when the founding partners sort of invented this methodology, I mean, invented is one of those words where they just put a few things together that they knew. They were able to match physician and group performance with patient flow so that the patients didn't have to wait as long. So we did that for a long time, and our original customers, we got very lucky. Some of our original customers were big Toronto customers with well-known names. So that business grew, and still we're the only people that do that. But secondary to that, we realized that if you want the physicians to work the shifts that you put them in to improve patient flow, you have to give them shifts they want to work. Because the minute you give them a shift they don't and they trade out of it, your algorithms and your databases and your knowledge, all that's out the window. So then we decided to build a product in conjunction with the original one that was primarily based on physician preferences. So that is actually our core business now. Our core business is our mid-tier level service, where we build schedules for emergency departments and other departments that give the physicians a really high degree of personal choice. So they have a lot of autonomy to tell us when and how they want to work. It's a bit paradigm shifting because it's far from the classic rotation that's often used, because scheduling is complicated and sometimes you have to put rules in place like a rotation to just get everybody in when they need to be in. But we find when we give physicians the option of telling us how and when they want to work, then they actually work more. And we have, they feel empowered. They can schedule themselves around their other professional obligations and their family obligations. And that has the effect of improving the overall atmosphere of the department. So they now work when they want to work. They have fewer swaps and trades. There tends to be, they're not as frustrated with their schedule because they didn't get what they needed and now they have to spend hours trying to fix it. We do that all for them. And so those are primarily our two main services. And then we also have a SaaS-based model where you can do it yourself using our technology as well. What I will say is what we do that's very different from our competition is that we don't offer an automated service. So automated scheduling is push-button solution whereby you enter a whole bunch of rules that limits what the computer can do and what the software can do. And our experience speaking to customers who have transitioned from that to us is that it sounds really great, theoretically it should really work, but really busy emergency department schedules that run 24/7 are quite complex. And what we find is that when they push that button, the result is that they have to spend hours and hours and hours fixing what the computer thought would be okay. And that's actually way more complicated than just having us do it, and usually way more expensive than just having us do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And can you talk about your role with the company?
So I am the Chief Administrative Officer. Really, what I generally say is I don't build schedules and I don't build software, but I'm involved in everything else. So I do marketing, I do sales. Right now I'm leading both those efforts. I do strategic planning, I do finances, I do HR. I do.
Every business needs a Lora Webb, for sure.
Yeah. Right.
And when you started with the company, like what stage was the business at?
It was a really early startup. So just a handful of clients, very small team, really small recurring revenue. I would say, I think we had 3 or 4 clients. We now have over, 100 contracts. And so, our client base is, some of our contracts have multiple clients. So if I look at the number of schedules we build or are managing in some capacity, we're well over 150 to 200 schedules. And we have over 100 clients or contracts, which is probably about 130 or 40 different hospitals or sites. So, when I came in 2014, I think we had 3. And only in Ontario. Now we're across Canada, in the United States, and in Australia.
So cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just on that, you guys, getting to Australia. You're in the UK or the UK. Is the UK still on the map?
No, we're not actively serving anybody in the UK right now. We had a couple of contracts. They have a very different healthcare system, and they have a lot of problems, and they're also really far behind the North American market in terms of using software to solve their scheduling issues. Okay. So we did work with a couple of sites before COVID, but then everything sort of broke down with COVID. So we continue to have conversations with lots of people in the UK, but just, our team is still limited and growing. So with our resources, we focus on Canada, focus on the US, and then Australia, where we're starting to see some momentum there in the Perth area, which is really exciting.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what's been the keys to, say, Australia? How did that come about?
We have a little newsletter that we haphazardly put together quarterly.
I received this newsletter.
Yeah, which is going to improve. There's a very
one
good
of your
print.
Biggest fans. Right?
Well, we have an intern who is the smartest kid I've ever met. And he just came to me today with a presentation on how we can improve our newsletter. And I'm like, have at her. Go for it. Do your best. So we're going to improve that over the next year. But we happened to put in a newsletter, hey, we're now in Australia. And so that came, I think originally it must have came from an advertisement that we do in a podcast.
Oh, right. Yep.
Right. And then we have a physician in Vancouver who spends half his time in Australia. He's Australian, and every 3 months he goes back and forth. Mm-hmm. So he uses our service in Vancouver, but he goes back and forth to Perth and said, hey, I know those people. I know that hospital. I'd love to introduce you to more people. We're like, of course, absolutely. Please do. So we've been working with him just to connect healthcare is different everywhere, but then also very similar everywhere. Right. But there are little nuances, right? Like they don't use the word physician, they use the word doctor. So there's little things that we need to do there. When you have someone with the right accent, boots on the ground, who can open doors for you, that's really made a difference.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so would you say that's kind of at the heart of your growth strategy is those connections?
Our growth from till now really has been referral. There's no doubt about it. We're incredibly sticky. I think we have about a 97% traction. Like we keep about 97% of our clients year over year. And in the almost 8 years I've been here, I can name every single client we've lost, and I know why. And very few of them are because, it just went wrong. They're usually just weren't a good fit in terms of what we had at the time to offer them. But generally speaking, we keep most of our clients, knock on wood. So I think because of that, the referral has always been really, really important to us, and how most of our business has grown.
Right.
Yeah.
And how about the U.S. market? Like, what have you found there? Like, what are the challenges with that market?
The challenge with the U.S. market is that there are some very big incumbent competition. So there's some really big companies that do a great push button solution. So we can't compete at that level. What we do offer there that is new to them is our advanced level. So that's not really something that anybody's really considered. They've never considered outsourcing that service, because I think a lot of emergency departments believe that they're unique, unicorns, and that there's no way anybody can understand what it's like to be in that specific department with those specific people. It's not actually the case. Our schedulers now at this stage, we have schedulers who've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, who have booked millions of shifts and who know more about that type of scheduling than anybody probably anywhere. Just because their experience across so many markets and so many different types of EDs. So there's very little that comes at them that they don't already know. So being able to message that is really difficult. It's really difficult to say, actually, we totally get what you need and we can do it for you. We can reduce your administrative burden, and actually your costs. We will probably be cheaper than your admins or your physician schedulers or whoever's building it now. So that's a difficult message. But, we've got 3 really big clients there now, all with really impressive names, where we can say, like, okay, we work with these guys, and these guys.
Right.
Go talk to them.
Right.
And they're not sort of like, they're nationally respected hospitals. Yeah.
And that push button competitor, for example, like, are they actually delivering on the automation?
They do deliver. No, they deliver something that people have gotten used to using. So they deliver a 60-70% solution, right? So they give the physician or the chief or the admin something to work with, as opposed to having to start from scratch. But ultimately, every time we talk to somebody, we hear about the hours and hours that have to be put in afterwards to massage things, because the rules that you have to, we saw an example once with one push button solution where there were 400 different rules that one site had to create, because every time they went to build a new schedule, there'd be a new exception. So they had to create a new rule. And so, even just maintaining those rules becomes really difficult and problematic. And then, what if this time you go to build a schedule and there's a new rule that you forget? Well, you push your button, you get your thing, and then you're like, I have to tear this down because I forgot about this new exception. Right. So that's what becomes really tricky and really frustrating for people using those systems. They work really well in environments where there is not a very complex schedule. Like, maybe like a inpatient surgery group where there's 3 shifts a day and there's 9 people to work it. You never really have to worry about holes. When you get into a 24/7 environment, it gets quite complicated. And there are a lot of moving parts, and that's when automation gets tricky.
And you worked in the hospital environment prior to this, right?
Yep, I was a scheduler. I was a nursing scheduler. Yeah.
So I guess that's another thing, right? Is just having that I know some of the founders and stuff, physicians or administrators themselves. Like, have you found that's a unique aspect of you guys?
So it's not necessary to work here, that's for sure. But it certainly adds, I think it adds a comfort level to our clients. I think we worked out one time that there was over 100 years of in-hospital experience in our staff. Mm-hmm. People working in various departments with various groups and various roles. But understanding that environment, like any other environment, just helps you sort of like put together all the pieces. Mm-hmm. So, if you've worked in a hospital, like I've worked in a hospital, yes, I worked with nurses and not doctors, but actually I did work with a lot of doctors as well. But knowing how fast paced that is, knowing what it looks like 24/7, knowing how the hospital system works, knowing how different levels work, how they interact with each other, all of that is really important when you're talking to, administrators or chiefs. It's a bit of familiarity that I think that they appreciate.
Any business lessons that stand out to you, like over the past 7 years? Because you've seen a dramatic change going from a small startup to where you are today. Like what are the lessons learned for you, like in all of this?
I think it's really important to have a good plan. I think sometimes when you're in startup mode, it's just fly by the seat of your pants and you're constantly in reaction mode. I think that you need to put time into lots of different types of planning. Strategic planning. What does your short, medium, and long-term strategic plan look like? What are your goals? It's really easy in software to get feature scope, right? So if you have a young software, and inevitably you're going to get a lot of feedback from your clients and all kinds of feedback. And if you try to solve all of their problems, your scope will go from this to this. Mm-hmm. You'll be trying to add all kinds of things. You might add a feature that really only applies to one client. So you spent all those hours, that time, that money to solve one person's solution when you could have been looking at a feature that would solve a problem for many clients. Mm-hmm. So having a really clear plan of what you want to achieve, who your clients are, what your goals are, is really, really important. And then making sure that you are always thinking about how you're going to sell that product. Early on it was like, okay, let's focus on the software development. Okay, let's do that. Now let's focus on the service department, process, procedures, how we work with our clients. Okay. Waiting until after you're done that to think about marketing and sales is too late. You need to be thinking about marketing and sales really early on so that you can build a pipeline, have a healthy funnel, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And that really requires a lot of planning early on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In terms of like that strategic planning, is there like a way that you like to approach it? Like, what's your methodology with strategic planning?
I like to have a really clear idea of what the goal is. So what is it? What do you see 5 years from now? What would you like this to look like? Do you want to have, do you want world domination? I know that my goal is world domination, but I have to make sure that that's aligned with the board. Mm-hmm. If that's your goal, how do we achieve that? What can we do like in the next 6 months? Okay, let's make sure that we grow this market. Can we start looking at these markets? Are there conferences in this market? Where does it make most sense? How are we going to scale that with our current staff? What are we going to need for HR in order to grow that? What does marketing for that look like? So I think it's just having a really clear idea of what that end goal is. If you don't have that, then you can't plan anything else to get there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you can really easily get off track. Because, you might have, all of a sudden you have, an inbound lead in Israel. Well, that's awesome. Yes, we'll do it. But that, all of a sudden, you can't go, oh, well, now we should be addressing the Israeli market.
Right.
Well, no, that's a one off. That's great. Let's see what happens with it. But the focus still needs to be this. So it's really easy to get distracted by other markets that all of a sudden become interested, by features that other people are doing that you think you should add. That can get really tricky. It can cost you a lot of money, and it can be really disruptive.
And in terms of like for you, like from a personal level, like is there, did you see yourself doing this kind of work? And like now that you've done 7 years of it, like what's your reflection on, everything you've accomplished?
I didn't see myself doing this kind. Now, this isn't my first startup, so maybe I should have had a clue that I am attracted to this kind of punishment. But I really like I really like problem solving, and I think this has shown me that I'm pretty good at putting the pieces together, even when things seem like unsolvable. Generally, I've found there's always a solution. You might not be 100% happy with it, but let's really think outside the box and how we can solve this problem, or come up with a strategy that's not just right now and that has, we can follow through long term. That's something that I think was a strength I didn't realize I had until I started working here. So, yeah, but no, I didn't. I mean, I started off as like the admin coordinator. So I was like, I can do that. I've done that lots of times. We were moving back from out of town. Yeah, I could start things here. I believed in the product. I still believe in the product, and I believe in the goal. I mean, if we can affect patient wait times, which ultimately improves overall patient care, and at the same time, especially these days, reduce burnout and give people a little bit of a break. I mean, it's these stories that we get where like people are they're just struggling. And if we can tweak their schedule just a little bit where it doesn't really impact the department, but it hugely impacts that individual for those 2 nights off or that weekend or this week or whatever it is, gives them a chance to have a breather and balance their life a little bit better. I mean, if we can do that, it's so important, and it really makes an impact. I mean, I've done some thinking lately just about my own career growth, and I've realized actually everything I've done has been generally for companies that are in healthcare or serve others. So it's clearly something I'm attracted to, and it may not be in the traditional way, but I certainly, maybe because I'm the daughter of a nurse and a cop, maybe that's just sort of like in me to try to, impact lives that have a positive impact on other lives.
And what would Laura today say to Laura, 7 years ago, starting this job?
Don't worry so much. It will be okay.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How have you learned to cope with that?
Is becoming numb to it a decent answer? I think it's because I've realized most things do work out. There is a solution for most things. And there are, you just gotta be careful what mountain you think you're gonna die on, because most of the time it doesn't really matter. So perspective is something that maybe you acquire based, like your experience will give you that. But little things that I used to worry about, you just can't waste that energy when there are so many other things to deal with. So I won't say that I still sleep easy. There's still lots of things on my mind, but I certainly don't worry about everything the way I used to. Yeah.
And what's the toughest part of the job today?
I would say making tough decisions that impact individual like when you are helping to run a business, you have to take the emotion out of it sometimes, and that's tricky. Because you can't be thinking really when you are responsible for lots of people in terms of like their regular income or anything like that, you have to be thinking of the collective rather than the individual. So that can be really tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in terms of challenges, like say marketing challenges, like what have you found tough from a marketing perspective with what you're doing?
It's the hardest thing is making sure that you have a budget set aside for it. It's and knowing your limitations. I think a lot of people think they can just get into marketing, but they can't. There's a lot of energy and knowledge that goes into that. So it's part of me, like someone like I may be able to go, yeah, that makes sense. Yes, that's a good plan. But it's being able to execute on that. So I think you have to have the resources in order to, like, I don't want to say pay for that, but essentially that is, like, you need to set money aside. That's not an afterthought. That has to come, that has to be foremost in your mind if when you're planning sales and marketing, because you need the marketing to drive the sales.
Yeah.
Referral is really great. It's been great for us, but it's not going to get you to world domination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the chicken and the egg, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else come to mind in terms of challenges, like just the sort of business challenges that you guys have really had to work to overcome?
I think what's really important as well is deciding what kind of business you want to be, right? So that's been a challenge along the way. It's where you get a lot of growth pains from your building your culture. So there are millions and millions of businesses, and as you build a career, you work with all different types. And when you have a startup or your own company, you get to kind of decide how you want that to be and what you want it to feel like. But there's a lot of traditional ways of doing it, and there's a lot of pushback when you try to deviate from that tradition. So I think that has sometimes been a challenge throughout the whole thing, because when you decide on your culture, you need to kind of stick to it and keep it consistent so that your staff knows what's expected. And as you grow from like 10 people to 15 people to 20 people, it gets really hard to make sure you're nailing that down, because it would be easy to introduce new things that could totally flatten that culture you've worked for years to accomplish. And in our little town, I think our culture is incredibly positive. It's something that people talk about outside of the work we do, because we've done things that are not traditional. We've done things like unlimited time off. People are floored when I tell them that. They have no idea how that can work. It works really well. And in fact, when you review at the end of the year, if you take all the time that people have spent off, and that would include like vacation, sick, lieu, et cetera, everything that's traditional, with a team like ours, you're only looking at about 21 to 23 days on average. That's actually really great. So now you've created an environment where people aren't feeling pressured to clock in and out all the time. They don't feel pressured to lie about why they're not at work. I hate that. I don't want anybody, first of all, to feel like they have to lie or to lie. Let's eliminate that. Let's eliminate the guilt on the phone talking about being sick when you just need a day in front of your video games. You know what? Just take a day in front of your video games. Do that. That's okay. So I think that it actually, there's more trust now between management and employees, because it's like, okay, you trust me to just take the time I need. That becomes really important. And we've really worked at fostering a culture of inclusivity, of authenticity. Be who you are. Don't want you to be someone you're not. Be who you are. Be passionate about what you're doing. So those are all things that we work really hard towards, and it's important to keep that in mind, especially when you're hiring and you're expanding, because that makes us who we are. Yeah.
Final question, from a leadership perspective, like what do you think is the most important quality? You're in a leadership role. What is the most important quality from your perspective?
Well, I think it's the whole leadership word. It's leadership versus management. So I think you need to hire really smart people that you can trust, and you need to be the example that they can follow. So be a leader. Like I don't think that we need to micromanage or manage people. I think we need to trust that they can do what we've hired them to do. If they can't, then we'll have a discussion, we'll support them, we'll see what happens, but then also lead by example. This is what, I'm going to be the person, I'm going to be my authentic self. I want you to be your authentic self. And this is sort of like the work ethic I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice and simple.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Laura, I appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Yeah, no problem at all. I hope that was useful.
Yeah, totally. It's just something that I started doing last year, and I love conversations, and it's easy just to like not make time for open-ended conversations, with the business community or whoever.
Yeah.
And it's amazing just people's experience. All of us have insight. I think that when we sit down and think about it, and somebody kind of coaxes it out of us, there's a lot of substance there. I think in all of us.
Yeah, I agree. I love these things. You should put like a little forum for business leaders or something. I mean, there's so much we can learn from each other. It's unbelievable. I love it.
And actually, just another question came to mind. In closing.
Yeah.
Just this pandemic, like as a business, and I mean, this is like brand spanking new for all of us. That's for sure. Um, just any comments on that, in just terms of how you guys? I know you're in healthcare, so maybe it's like a great time to be in business. But any lessons or high points that sort of come to mind when you think about how you got through the last couple of years?
I think the pandemic reaffirmed our resilience and agility. So we were in a transitional phase right before it. We had gone from one service, our primary business, one service. We were toying with adding a second level of service, and then we acquired a third that was broken that we had to work on. So there was a lot going on. So to add a pandemic on top of it was like, oh my God. But our team really, I'm really proud of our team, because they just sort of like, okay, let's go, let's do this. We had to completely revamp how we did most things. All of our sales before were very much face to face.
Right.
So we were, flying all over North America and England. Monthly there were people out doing sales calls. That all had to transition to virtual. Our service team, when we used to implement a new client, they were on the ground. They were there for a week. So if we were implementing, in England, in Boston, wherever, we had 2 or 3 people, they were in the hospital, they were meeting face to face, they were training people. So that all had to change. So it made us become much more efficient. It made us work as a team to come up with solutions that were sustainable and that made sense. I don't think we're going to go back to either one of those models, even when we can. We'll just stick to the way we're doing things. We did realize that we were better collectively together and in person. So some business model, some work environments might do okay working from home. For us, I think we're much more productive when we're together. It's maybe the culture we've built, maybe the types of people that we hire. But there's a lot of ideas, idea sharing. But that's okay. I mean, the pandemic didn't have to prove that you could work remotely. It just had to make clear what your strengths and weaknesses were. And our strengths is that we're very agile. We can develop software, in a week to solve a problem. We can change our processes and procedures. We can get creative. But we work best when we're together and idea sharing.
Cool. All right, Laura. Well, like I said, I know you're busy, so I'll leave you to it. Again, really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. It was really great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you. I will share this with you when we get it put together. We tended to kind of pull out 2 or 3 highlights from it and kind of put those on LinkedIn. But yeah, no, I'm sure there's folks that'll get something from some of the things you've shared.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, I would love to see what the other people are saying too, because as all of this, with all of this happening with our company,
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning a lot from really talented people and really smart people. And it's even growing my base and skill set. So what it reinforces is that, like, just talking to more people who have their own companies, have been up against the same struggles, it's so important.
It is. If anything, it's encouraging, and I think we have a lot to share with each other. That is significant, right? Can really help us along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, coolio. Well, I'm sure
Okay.
we'll be in touch. Say hello to everybody,
Will
and
do.
yeah, I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Okay, take
All
care.
right. Thanks,
All
Laura.
right.
Take care.
Bye.